Hi everyone and welcome to our next tutorial in Turing. In this tutorial we're going to take a look at something called arrays. Arrays are commonly used in not just Turing but many different programming languages, and we can do a number of things with an array. But if we look at this graphic over here, basically what we can do is use an array to store numbers or strings, and then we can do whatever we want once we have them stored. We could store a class list of names. We could store a set of test scores for a class. So we can store integers, we can store real numbers, or we can store strings. So if we take a look at this first example here, this is what we call a single dimensional array that has 5 elements. The array itself needs to have a name, and in this case here we're calling it list. And therefore, if we have 5 elements, list 1 is represented by this here, and we are storing the value of 20 inside list 1. We're storing the value of 50 inside list 2. We're storing the value of 30 in list 3, and the value of 90 in list 4, and the value of 60 in list 5. So how do we set that up with the correct syntax in Turing? We're going to set up a var command, and after that we are going to name the array. So we called this list full colon array, and then 1 dot dot 5 represents the elements in the array. So element 1 all the way up to element 5 of, and then whatever we're filling it of, either be integers, reals, or strings. We are going to assign the array initial values. We don't have to do that, but in this case we are. So we are going to say that element 1 has a value of 20. List 1 has a value of 20. List 2 has a value of 50. List 3 has a value of 30. List 4 has a value of 90, and list 5 has a value of 60. Then what we do in the next line is simply go into the array using the name of it, and then in brackets we're saying go in and put to the screen whatever is the second element. So if we run the program, we can see it up top here that the second element has a value of 50, and that's what's displayed on the screen. So there's a simple example of an array, how we filled it and how we went in and pulled an element from the array and displayed it on the screen. Let's take a look at another example. In this case here, we are going to create an array, and then we're going to fill it with strings. So in this case here, we're also calling the array list. We could call it whatever name we want. We could call this words, and therefore I'm going to change this down here to words. And all it's going to do is, first we're going to declare a variable x as an integer, declare its initial value equal to 0. Then we're going to set up an array called words, and it is size of 4 elements. So we have to go 1 dot dot 4, and it's of string. We are filling it with string values. We are going to fill it initially here, so we need this syntax. And when you fill a string, you must put the values in quotations. So they should turn red if you've done this properly to initialize strings. The next line simply uses the random int function, generates a random number from 1 to 4 and stores it in x. And the last line basically just looks inside the array called words and will pull out whatever element comes up randomly. So if it randomly chooses 4, then it will go and pull out words 4, which is CPU. So if we run the program, you can see in this case here we ended up with an output of ROM. So we know that the random number generated must have been 3. It outputted words 3 and put that to the screen. So that's how you can fill an array using a string. If we take a look at the next example, we are going to create an array and then use the numbers in the array somehow. So in this case here, we are going to create a variable called TOT for total. It is a real number. We're going to set its initial value equal to 0. We're going to create an array called list. It has 5 elements, and we are inserting real numbers into that array. We're going to initialize the array and put in values 20, 50, 30, 90, and 60. Those are the 5 elements that will go into the array. We're going to set up a for loop, and in the for loop, we are going to go through it 5 times. And the first time through, the value of x is equal to 1. So it's going to go in and look at the first element, list 1, which is equal to 20. It's going to add it to tot, which is initially 0. 0 plus 20 gives you a new total of 20. It's going to go back. This is the for loop, so it goes back up here. This time the x value is 2. So it's going to go look at list 2, which is 50. So 50 goes here plus total, or tot, which is 20. Add those two together and get 70. So the new value for tot is 70, and it will continue to do that for the 5 loops. Then at the end, we're going to put TOT, the total, to the screen. So it should come out with an output of the total of these numbers here. 20 plus 50 plus 30 is 100, plus 90 is 190, plus 60 is 250. So if we run this program, yes, we do get an output of 250 to the screen. So that's how we can initialize an array with values, and then we can go into the array using a for loop, and in this case here we calculated the total. There's other things that we could do inside a for loop with the array. That's just one example. The next one sets up an array, and this time we are going to have a variable called smallest, and we're going to initialize it at 100. We're going to create a variable called list, and in that array of 5 elements, we're going to put in integers, and we're going to initialize that array with the values 9, 17, 8, 26, and 15. We're going to use a for loop to basically go through the array and determine what will be the smallest element in that array. So the first time through, list I has a value of 1. So it says if list element 1, which is 9, is less than smallest. Well, we said the initial value for smallest is 100. If 9 is less than 100, which is true, then we will do the next line. And what that does is it takes list 1, which was 9, and puts that as the new value for smallest. Then we end the if, and we go to the bottom of the for loop, and we go back up to here. This time I is equal to 2. So it says if list 2, so we go look in the array and say that's 17. If 17 is less than smallest, remember smallest is now 9. If 17 is less than 9, that is not true, so it will not execute this line. It will just jump down to end if, and then we'll go to end for. This time we'll go back to the for loop. 4 has a value, this case for I, of 3. So If list 3, which is 8, if 8 is less than the smallest, which is 9, that is true. Then it will take list 3, which is 8, and put that into smallest. So the new value of smallest is 8. It will continue to go through the for loop 2 more times. You can see here that these numbers are not less than 8. So the smallest number in the array should come out to 8. If we run the program and check, yes, that is the output that we would expect. In this program, we are going to use a couple of for loops in the program. Sometimes what we might need to do is go into the array more than once. And in this case here, that's what we're going to do. We are going to create some variables called total and av. Those are real, and we're going to set them initially equal to 0. We're going to set up an array of 5 elements. We're going to fill it with real numbers, and the real numbers are listed here. We're going to set up a for loop, and in that for loop, we're going to find a total of the numbers inside that array. So the first time through, list A is equal to 1, so list 1 has a value of 60. Adds to the total, which is 0. 60 plus 0 is equal to 60, and the new total value is 60. It will go through and add all of those numbers together to get the total. We're going to finish the for loop, and then we're going to determine the average of those numbers. So average is calculated by taking the total and dividing by the number of numbers, which is 5. In the next for loop, we are going to go in and we want to find out which of the numbers are bigger than the average. So we need to go through each element. So again, we need to set up a for loop from 1 to 5. There's 5 elements we need to check. So if list I, this time I is equal to 1, is greater than the average, then it will put, yes, that number is bigger than the average of av. It will go through all of those elements, check them all, and then when we run the program, we get the following. 84 is bigger than the average of 73.4. 92 is bigger than the average of 73.4. 75 is bigger than the average of 73.4. That's an introduction to arrays, how we can set them up in Turing, how we can fill them with integers, reals, or strings, and then use them for different functions. That's it for this tutorial. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.